Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. Very often in these messages we look at some situations that are unusual, quirky news stories, weird events, often with a bit of humour. Today in our subject there's no occasion for humour whatsoever. 25 years ago today was the Omagh bombing. A dreadful atrocity. It's commonly stated that 29 people were killed. In fact, there was also a pair of unborn twins that died along with their mother. And so, in fact, 31 human beings lost their life in Omagh 25 years ago. Our family has connections on Janice's side with the Omagh area. In fact, one of her relatives was actually involved in the aftermath of what happened, ferrying injured people to hospital in the back of his car because the ambulance service and everything was overwhelmed. One of the most difficult things for people that have survivors and relatives from the Omagh bombing is that nobody has ever been convicted of the crimes. There have been civil cases brought against people and damages won, but no conviction has ever occurred in the courts for what happened on that day. And you can understand why people who had their lives ripped apart on that day, whose lives have never been the same again since, would feel aggrieved and feel how unfair it is that nobody was properly brought to justice for what happened. And sadly, the Omagh bombing is not unique in this respect. There's been many times in history when atrocities have happened, when great wrongs have been done, and it seems like justice has not happened. You read the Psalms and you hear the cry from the psalmist when he says, why do the wicked prosper? Why do people do evil things and get away with it? The whole unfairness of it all is a cry that has gone up from many hearts over the years in respect to many events and of course to what happened in Omagh. But we as Christians believe that God is a loving God, but we believe he is also a holy God and a God of justice. And we believe that God will cause justice to be done in the end. That means there is a final reckoning. There is a judgment that lies beyond what happens in the courts and what happens in this life, that there is a judgment of God that will take place in the future. But of course, it also means, and part of this whole idea of God being just, is that Jesus himself bore the punishment for every atrocity in his body on the cross. That's why there is forgiveness on offer to all of us for the sins that we have committed, even sins as great as those that were committed on this day 25 years ago in Omagh. But God's forgiveness is not cheap. God is not like a heavenly Santa Claus that nods his head and says, all right, it doesn't matter, you're grand. No, God is a God of justice. And for that reason, God himself, in the person of his Son, Jesus Christ, stepped in to take the rightful punishment and justice that was due for every wrong, for every atrocity, for every murder, for every act of brutality, treachery, and unkindness. And Jesus bore it all upon the cross. It's very hard for us to understand that. It's very hard for us to explain precisely how that works and how it happens. But it is a central part of the Christian faith. Not just that God offers salvation to us all, including those who have sinned the most, but that God did himself in Jesus take the punishment upon himself. And so while we struggle with the unfairness of things as we see them in this life, we know that when we stand in eternity in God's presence, we will see that God is absolutely just and that justice has been done in a way that is more righteous and more fair than anything that any human court could ever impose upon a criminal or a murderer. I thank God. I thank God that God paid the price. I thank God that I don't have to pay the price for my sin because I've placed my faith in Jesus Christ. If you have not done so, I'd urge you to do the same today, to pray and say, Jesus, thank you for carrying my sins upon the cross so that I do not have to pay the penalty due for the wrongs that I did. That's the power of the gospel. May God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.